Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilt from Wilt'sWorld.com, and this is going to be episode 85. This week we're talking about flying them unfriendly skies. And the reason I say flying them unfriendly skies is because there's a lot of news out there these days about all the violence and the violence upticks that have happened on airlines throughout our country, and probably throughout the world too, but I'm focused primarily on us here in the U.S., this one for sure. And the uptick in violence and unruly passengers on our airlines, it's something that we need to talk about. It's something that's got to be addressed. And that's partially what I'm going to be talking about today. But first, what have you done today to make your life a better life? What have you done today to make the world a better place? You see, we did not create the hate. But with your help, we can derate the hate. It's up to us as individuals. You, as an individual, have what it takes to make your life a better life. It's really up to you. And by making your life a better life, you make the world a better place. It's really about changing attitudes, bettering the world one attitude at a time. Come with me. Let's do this thing together. Let's better the world one attitude at a time. And whether that starts with you or starts with somebody you know, you can play a part. You can definitely play a part by changing your attitude, or you can share the D-Rate the Hate podcast with somebody else who you know may need to change their attitude. Share it with your friends. They can share it with their friends. There's a lot in here that can benefit so many people, and I just ask, give it a fair shake, share it with your friends, talk about it, share that feedback with me. Share that feedback with everybody on audio platforms everywhere that you find the D-Rate the Hate podcast. Leave us a rating, leave us a review, and share us on all forms of social media. That is greatly appreciated. So let's get back to the topic at hand, flying them unfriendly skies. What is going on with people nowadays that they have just lost their minds? They're getting on airlines, disrupting, assaulting other passengers, assaulting flight crews. Where did this come from? What is going on with people? So I read an article today, and actually I read an article the other day, and that led me to read a bunch of other articles, and I'll explain all that shortly. But I read this article the other day, and it started talking about, how we've had, well over 5,000 reported incidents upon airlines now, just this year, just in 2021. There's over 5,000 incidences where people have become unruly on airplanes, and not all of them became violent, but all of them were obviously a problem because they were reported to the FAA, and it just blows my mind. I mean, let's put this in perspective, and I'm just going to throw out some numbers here because, like I said, this led me, the article that I read led me to read a bunch of other articles because I wanted to try and find as much information as I could that really made sense, because, let's face it, there's so much misinformation out there and it's hard to weed through and find the right stuff. So I read as many articles as I could from as many different news organizations or so-called news organizations that I could to try and find as much information as I could, including going to like FFA or FAA.gov and the government websites. But so FAA reported, and there's been over 5,000 reported cases of unruly passengers this year alone in 2021, and the uptick. The first article I read tried to blame the uptick on all sorts of things, but the reality is the vast majority of the uptick in these incidences of violence and unruly passengers had to do with masks and had to do with the mask mandates, and I'm going to get into that in a few minutes as well. But so over 3,600 of the over 5,000 cases of unruly passengers and people becoming violent with flight crews and on airplanes, over 3,600 of those were related to masks. This launched 950 investigations, which is up sixfold over the previous year. And to put that in perspective, actually since 2019, or in 2019 rather, there was only 146 investigations total on airlines stemming from unruly passengers and people becoming violent on airplanes. So just think about that. This year alone, we've had 950, nearly 1,000 investigations so far this year alone. And in 2019, there was a total of 146. So people are losing it, right? This is going absolutely no place good. And this is a trend that we've got to get a hold of. We've got to get under control because this is not the way that we want things, not the way that we want things to go at all. This is horrible. All right, so I'm going to take this episode in a couple different directions because I think it warrants a couple different directions. One, based on the first article that I read. In all reality, just an absolute garbage article that kind of brought this topic to the forefront in my mind because, frankly, I didn't know that it was such a problem. But it's definitely a problem. It's a very clear and present problem that people are acting out and becoming unruly on airplanes and assaulting flight attendants and other passengers and just being a nuisance, a very, very dangerous public nuisance. So that's one thing I want to talk about. And then the other thing I want to talk about is the actual catalyst for a lot of this outrage and nonsensical behavior that's taking place on these airlines, and that's the masks. The masks. Well, I'll get into the masks, but first I want to talk about that article. And it was a very, very disappointing article. At first, I thought it was going to be a decent article. It started out laying out some what I thought was pretty good information, and it seemed to be a decent article to start with. But as I got deeper into the article, it showed a very clear bias, an agenda-driven bias in the article that just really turned me off. But it actually made me dig deeper into what was going on. So, and I'll tell you why. In my opinion, almost nothing we see in the mainstream media today can be trusted. So, and all of these things are pretty much op-eds. They're opinion-based garbage, but at least, when I open my browser now, there's basically a buffet of different headlines that I can look at and different trending articles that I can look at, and I'll look at them, and some of them are just so nonsensical that I just completely ignore them, and others, they catch my eye because there's something there that I want to know more about. So I opened up this one, I read it, and like I said, I could clearly pick out that there's an issue there. There's an issue with unruly passengers. There's an issue with something going on our airlines that we have to address. As I read deeper into this article and it got further into it and it started talking about some statistics that were just completely beyond believable to me. I think it said something about 61% of all violent incidences on airplanes now involve some kind of racial, homophobic, or gender-driven slur. And I got to thinking to myself, this just doesn't pass the smell test. It doesn't pass the smell test. This is 2021. Everybody knows racism is gross. Homophobia is gross. Gender, what do they call it? Misogynistic types of comments are just not acceptable in this day and age. They're not. And nobody, it doesn't pass the smell test. You're not going to get on a big tube full of people of all races, genders, sexual preferences, whatever the case may be, and just start beating the hell out of somebody, committing a hate crime, and expect to just walk away and get away with it. I'm not believing it. It doesn't pass the smell test, okay? But the information, like I said, at least led me down a path where I wanted to know more about what was going on. The reason that I don't believe this nonsensical number of 61% of all these incidences included some kind of racial slur or homophobic slur or whatever, not only because this is 2021 and you're not going to get away with that in public, but also because when I started reading articles, I Googled and I DuckDuckGo'd and I, whatever, trying to get the most diverse storyline I could, I just started researching violence on airplanes and read dozens of articles. And no other article other than that one mentioned these incidences of violence, including racial slurs and homophobic slurs and everything else. So, and the reality is, everybody who knows, or everybody who reads anything online or watches the news nowadays knows that all of your major news, so-called news networks, are breathlessly looking for ways to tie everything to race. So if this was really a racial issue or a homophobic issue, there would be all kinds of articles out there relating this and turning this into a racial problem. But that's not the case. It does a huge disservice. I've talked about this on the podcast before. It does a huge disservice to the real concept of racism. When we try to make things about racism or homophobia or whatever your cause is, when you try to interject that into a place where it really had no place being, it does a huge disservice to real incidences that involve racism or homophobia or whatever. This reminds me of another article I just read. The article, I won't even bring up the garbage article or give any kind of publicity to the article that kind of started this for me. But I did read another article the other day that about an incident at a restaurant. What happened at Carmine's, a restaurant in New York City. This will kind of actually segue a little bit into the other thing that I was going to talk about with the masks. But there was an incident at Carmine's, and I've never been to Carmine's. In fact, I spent very little time in New York City, and if I never go back, I am so okay with that. But there's this restaurant in New York City where a group of people were trying to go there to eat, and they have a vaccine mandate where you've got to show a vaccine passport to get in, and the people that were trying to get in did have a vaccine, but the people that were meeting them there did not, and started a confrontation with the hostess, and a whole bunch of stuff went down. And long story short, the news media got involved right away, and I talked about this in our last episode, the age of perpetual outrage. The news media got involved right away, blew this up into something that it definitely wasn't, tried to make it about race when there was never a racial slur interjected in there by anybody. And now we've got people protesting outside of Carmine's and trying to make it a Black Lives Matter thing. And it just turned into a complete debacle based on misinformation from the media or so-called media, whatever. We have to be sure, and these media outlets that promote this racial division through misinformation and misleading people to believe that things had something to do with race when they never had anything to do with race. That's the devil's work. That's horrible. That's horrible to do. It does a huge disservice to those people who have suffered real racism. It does a huge disservice to the people trying to get the real information. And shame on you people for doing that. So that article, like I said, trying to turn this whole rage in the sky, flying the unfriendly skies, trying to turn that into something that has to do with race and homophobia, and it's just gross. It's disgusting, and shame on you for writing such a garbage article. But let's get to the mask thing, because quite honestly, well over 70% of the incidences that are taking place in our skies on these airlines, the unruly passengers, the violence against our flight attendants and flight crews, over 70% have something to do with masks. And anybody who's listened to me, I've been against masks from the very beginning of this nonsensical pandemic response by our government. And don't pretend like I don't believe that this virus is real, because I do. But I also understand that the mask thing and the government's overall response to this thing, quite honestly, is just an absolute travesty in every sense of the word. So look, the gist of my point here is we have to be better than this 5,000 some odd cases of violence on airlines against flight crews and other passengers. People are losing their minds, not because of the virus, not because of the pandemic, but because of the lockdowns, the number of people that have lost everything because of the lockdowns and the mental health issues that come along with these masks and being told to do something that doesn't make any sense. People are losing their damn minds. And we have to acknowledge that as a reality, that people are losing their minds because this is crazy. It's nonsensical. And the reality is masks do very, very little and have caused probably more problems during this pandemic than they've ever done any good. And there is science to back up that opinion. May not be the science that you like, but the reality is there is science out there. There are studies out there that prove that the efficacy of masks is far less than anybody in the mainstream media will give them, give any earplay to. So don't be surprised when people are losing their minds. But if you're one of those people that cannot stand it, the reality is don't fly. I do not like masks. I heard a story about a family being kicked off of an airline because they wouldn't put a mask on a 2-year-old child. I will tell you, if somebody tries to put a mask on my 2-year-old daughter, they will have to kill me to make that happen. I will not let that happen. I do not like that. But if that's the case, I'm not going on an airplane because they're going to try and put a mask on my 2-year-old daughter. Plain and simple. I've already decided if a store requires me to wear a mask, I will shop at a different store. If a restaurant requires me to wear a mask, I will eat at a different restaurant or I won't eat out at all. I've made that choice. If the government wants to mandate ridiculousness, I just won't play the game. And you, as a responsible adult, if an airline requires, or if the government is going to require that you wear a mask on an airline, they're just doing their job. It's not that flight attendant, or it's not that hostess at a restaurant, or it's not that store attendant that's making you wear that mask. It's some ridiculous jackass in some government position that's making them do that. If you don't want to comply, don't comply. But that also means don't get on that airplane because, quite honestly, it is a federal offense to interfere with a flight crew. We all know that. If you don't know that, you do now. And don't play that game. They're just doing their job. And fighting them or beating up a flight attendant or beating up some other passenger because they are wearing a mask or they're not wearing a mask or they told you to wear a mask. Knock it off. It's gross, it's disgusting, it's stupid behavior, and it's not helping anybody. It's certainly not helping the cause. So the reality is, if you don't want to wear a mask, don't get on a bus, don't get in a taxi, don't get on an airline, figure out a different way to get there or don't go. It's not worth thousands upon thousands of dollars in fines, and it really just gives the idiots that make these rules more fodder for making more rules. So please, I beg of you, do not play into this nonsensical crap. Just wait it out. Hopefully things will get better. Hopefully cooler heads will prevail. Hopefully more sensible minds will get in there and make this nightmare stop. And we can all get back to living like normal human beings without a paper mache or cloth false security shield on our faces. So, friends, we find ourselves in a position again where government is trying to fix a problem that they created and continuing a perpetual cycle of ridiculousness. And we as individuals have to make the choice not to play into that, not to lose our minds, not to beat each other up, not to beat up a flight crew. It's nonsensical hate, and we're better than that. We are better people than that, and don't allow that stuff to get between us. Don't allow that stuff to get in between us, because it's up to you and I to live better lives. It's up to you and I to be better people. And with that, I'm going to wrap up this episode and say get out there, be kind to one another, always be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. Friends, please share these episodes, share the D-Rate the Hate podcast. Get on there, subscribe to us wherever you get your audio, leave us some ratings and feedback. It is so helpful in getting that message out there. With that, I'm going to back on out of here, and we'll catch you next week. Take care.